Hello and welcome to Addiction Truths, brought to you by Country Road Recovery Center. I'm your host, Pierce Rosengren. In this podcast series, we delve deep into the profound impact of addiction on families. We share insights, experiences, and advice on navigating this challenging journey. Before we begin, a general reminder to our valued listeners. While we deeply appreciate your engagement and encourage you to reach out with questions, comments, or concerns, please refrain from posting the names of family members who are currently in our program or who have been in the past. Your discretion helps us maintain the privacy and safety of all involved. We're here to offer support, answer questions, and build a community of understanding and healing. So let's start the conversation and bring some truths about addiction into the light.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to Addiction Truths Podcast. My name is Pierce. I'll be your host this evening. I'm joined by Derek and April. Hey, April's going to be sharing a little bit of her story with us today. I want to thank everybody for joining us. Hopefully you can get something out of it. The idea behind Addiction Truths is to shed some light on what it's like for family members that have loved ones that are struggling with addiction. And April has a very unique story. April is somebody who has struggled with addiction herself. April has also lost a lot to addiction, but I think has gained more in the recovery from addiction. I'm excited to talk to you today about kind of your walk with God. You know, before the podcast, you had mentioned that being something really, really close to you, really special to you. It's helped you with a lot of the healing. And yeah, let's get going. Derek, how's your week been, man? How's your month been, really? Because we haven't talked to.
Heck of a month.
Heck of a month?
Heck of a month.
That's good, buddy.
Everything's good, man. Everything's good. I'm glad April's here. She's really nervous. I'm stoked about that.
Yeah.
My favorite thing to do is to make people more nervous. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to lean into that awkward tension.
Really grateful for that. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
I don't know why you're here. Let me help you relax. We're just talking about life.
Yeah.
You love to do that.
You're right. Thank you for having me, guys. I'm happy to be here.
Yeah.
I am nervous, but that's just me. It's just natural for me.
I mean, if it makes you feel any better, the average viewership is only like 17K.
Shut up.
It's probably only 17.
Okay.
So
Okay.
Probably.
My
17, very,
Hi,
very.
Mom.
yeah, I was about to say your mom, my mom. That
Yeah.
covers it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love you, Mom.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, I'm glad you had a good month, man. I had a really interesting month. Not to make it all
You're a
about
hurricane
me.
survivor.
I am. I'm Hurricane Pierce. I was in Florida this last
Wow.
week, and I had no idea. We were there for a work conference. I had no idea that there is a hurricane barreling towards Florida.
Wow.
I'm oblivious to this. I'm just looking forward to going to Magic Kingdom. And then the next day, they're like, there's a hurricane, a Category 5 hurricane headed your way.
Wow.
Like, well,
Makes you feel better. It was downgraded to a 3
yeah, it hit us
before it
at
hit
a 3.
landfall. I was
Derek
all out
knows.
myself publicly to everybody else. I have officially turned into an old man because for the entire week, I was locked in to watching hurricane coverage on the Weather Channel.
Yeah.
And every time my wife would come in, she'd look at me and I'd be like, she's been downgraded to a 4. Middle of Oklahoma, locked into watching hurricane coverage.
Yeah. So I guess we brought the tornadoes with us.
Yeah.
Because ahead of hurricane,
That was the
there a
craziest
ton of
part.
tornadoes.
Yeah, that was the craziest part.
I think we experienced 130 tornado warnings in
Wow.
Florida.
Yeah.
When I was there.
Wow.
You thought you were escaping tornado warnings.
No, we're just getting started.
Yeah.
Just getting started. Cool. Well, tell us a little bit about your own personal struggle with addiction. I think that'd be a good place to start.
Well, excuse me.
How old were you when addiction really settled in?
So for me, addiction settled in right away. It wasn't something that happened progressively. I was 14 the first time I used, and at 14 I was an addict. I mean, the things that I did progress, but I was instantly hooked. You know what I mean? And I went all in, you know. I mean, I started, of course, with marijuana and alcohol, but quickly was doing meth and hallucinogens, all the things, you know. I was an IV user by 15 years old. You know.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a really young age to start IV
Yeah.
using. Yeah.
Yep. I was all in.
Yeah,
know?
you were.
So
How did you? Maybe would it be helpful if we just ask questions?
that'd be
about
great.
that?
Yeah. Thank you.
Because I like, even though we've worked together for a while, I don't know a ton of details about your story.
Right.
So I'm excited to ask questions. Like for you, I know you said that progression happened really fast. Like I started using, and within a year or two, I was all the way to IV drug use. How did your like introduction to drugs and alcohol happen? Like what was kind of the baby steps into even alcohol and marijuana, if that question makes sense?
Okay, so I was really an addict, an alcoholic from birth, honestly. You know, like growing up, like, you know, I did all the things. I was in dance, I was a cheerleader, I was all these things, but like I always kind of felt like an imposter. If that makes sense. It never felt like, oh, this is where I'm going. You know, I think I always had this little like dark seed inside of me that was just like waiting to like grow, you know? And I first smoked pot with a friend of mine, and I was like, this is the business, you know what I mean? And like in school, I mean, I had a lot of friends, but I wouldn't say that I was popular by any means. And I always went for the underdog. It was like whoever didn't have friends, that's who I wanted to be friends with. And in my school, which was like a very, you know, white school, you know, I would kind of hang out with the one person there that was probably breaking the rules, you know, and so from there, it was just kind of guys also. Like after I started using, then you start dating the bad guys, you know, and it's like, I'm going to do what the bad guys doing. And it just progressed and progressed, you know. It's kind of where I first felt at home though. Like, you know, in that scene, I was like, oh, these are my people. You know, I've been waiting for you people my whole life, in a sense, you know. I was just able to be myself. You know, I didn't feel like I had to meet anybody's standard. I guess maybe because the standard was lower so far.
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I had to keep trying and keep trying. It was just like, oh, I can relax now. You know?
I certainly share that.
Yeah.
With your story.
Yeah.
I relate with that a lot. You know, growing up for me, I was always I was very shy, very concerned about what other people thought about me, but that particular group was very welcoming.
Yeah.
And the standards, like you said, were very high.
Yeah.
And so I fit right in.
Yeah, it's an easy fit, you know? And
did either
excelled.
of you have like childhood backgrounds that you would call like abnormal or abnormally traumatic, or do both of you feel like you grew up like fairly normal Oklahoma kids? Does that question make sense?
I had an amazing childhood.
Yeah.
Okay. It was just me and my mother. Like at first, I did have a stepdad come into the scene, but like me and my mom were so close. I'm an only child. Excuse
That
me.
explains a lot.
Everyone says that, but I don't get it. But I was an only child, so I just had like, and the first grandchild. So I had like everybody's undivided attention and like love. But I was really outgoing, and they had so much hope for me.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? There's like all this pressure to be like this and be that, and it was, I guess, too much for me. You know what I mean? It just didn't it just never seemed, like I said, I felt like an imposter. It just wasn't right for me. I didn't know my biological father, and even though I had this great life, like not knowing him, like especially coming into puberty, like had this really big impact on me.
Yeah.
You know, because I felt like an imposter, I felt like I didn't know myself. Like I need to know this person because like
some level of identity crisis.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Huge level of identity
What was
crisis.
yours like?
My childhood?
Yeah, just briefly.
It was really good.
Yeah.
I had a really good childhood. I did grow up in a very typical alcoholic family. You know, so we played all the roles. I was a hero. My sister was the scapegoat. I had another third sister. She's a loner. Dad, alcoholic. Mom, kind of the stereotypical enabler.
But that's all hindsight. You remember childhood being good.
My childhood was amazing.
Yeah.
That's all hindsight looking back.
I only ask that because I feel like a part of like what families struggle with, at least when I talk to them, is feeling like they're abnormal because they feel like home life has always been relatively stable, but that now they've got a young person who's out using, and they think that that's an abnormal experience. And I don't necessarily think that that's abnormal. I think that there are a lot of people that begin drinking, have alcohol and drug related problems, or become addicts or alcoholics who actually have a pretty stable home environment.
Yeah.
Like on the spectrum,
Yeah.
it's not just people who have terrible childhoods and
No,
home lives, right?
not at all.
No, yeah.
My
Sure.
childhood was A1.
Yeah.
You know, and I think that because I was the only one in my family that, I'm not saying that I didn't have family members that experimented with drugs in high school and
Sure.
things like that, but I said I went all in, and my family didn't know how to deal with that. You know, they were like, they'd never experienced that, they'd never seen it, you know, and so I think it made it really hard for them in knowing how to approach the situation, you know.
What were some of the things that your family did to try and mitigate?
Well, my mom, I love you, Mom. Okay. Let me just say, I love you so much. But I think that she didn't want to believe it. You know, I was a really good manipulator as well, you know, and she, you know, she worked a lot, and she just, you know, I had all this potential, and she just really wanted to believe in that. And even though like the outward signs were definitely there, I feel like she was just hoping that maybe I'd grow out of it, or maybe it wasn't as bad as it was. I don't think she knew I was an IV user, you know. I would run away. I would just take on. I think she would just be glad that I'd be home, and she would know where I was at, you know. And that was a win in a sense, you know. Sorry, I lost my train of thought.
No. You're good.
What did all that do to your family relationships?
Oh man, I destroyed every relationship, you know. Like my mom, like I said, she didn't know what to do. My aunt, who I'm really close to, I mean, she would just kind of tolerate me, you know. Like they would let me. I'd be like 14, we'd go on like a family outing or something, and they'd make sure I had cigarettes or something, because I just turned into this negative person, you know. I just remember I was just angry. I had no reason to be angry, but I was so mad, and I was mad at them for whatever reasons, you know. I come from a really close family, and I just put distance between all of us. You know, by the end of my addiction, which was 20 plus years later, you know, I was completely isolated from all of them. You know, I might come to a Christmas or something. I might or might not come to a holiday function. You know, like towards the end, like I desperately wanted relationships with them because I knew I was loved. You know, I knew I was loved, but it's really hard. You know, it's really hard to open those doors back up. And even though I knew they were there, they would always be welcoming to me. They would never turn me away, no matter what. I could, even if I was high, you know, they were so loving, are so loving. You know what I mean?
When you were, when you were not 15 anymore, going on 20s, you know, early 20s, was there any kind of boundaries that your family would set with you?
Oh yeah, I couldn't go live with they wouldn't let me live with them.
Right.
You know what I mean? Absolutely not. And my mom would still probably give me money if I came up with a really good story of why I needed it. But it wasn't like, no. They would help me get into treatment or something like that. Yeah. You know, they'd still open their door to me if I wanted to come over and eat or something like that. They would, you know, they'd never it was tough love, but it wasn't like tough love. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it was like there was some balance of...
Yeah, it was like I had burned the bridge. There was, you know...
How old were you when you got sober?
37.
Yeah, so you really were out for 20... Was that your first attempt, or did you have like kind of...
I had one little sober stretch, and at the time, like I didn't really know about recovery. You know what I mean? I knew that there was like 12-step programs and things like that, and I had made it into the doors, but I was really young, and there was not like strong leadership in that environment, so it didn't like grab hold of me. But I had a child, and I really wanted to get it right. It was my son, my third son, my third child, I mean, and I had to get this one right, you know, and so I was able to get sober. But then, you know, it starts with a little drink here, a little drink there. And that was actually for several years, but it didn't last because of alcohol, really, you know. Yeah, but I didn't realize that alcohol was going to lead me back to addiction. You know what I mean? And and I could drink for a little while, for a few years. I was like, I maintained
Yeah.
that. But then one night of too much alcohol, and I was gone for 8 more years.
You can always maintain it until
you don't.
can't.
yeah, until
Yeah.
you can't.
Yeah.
So when did you have your first child?
17.
When you were 17?
Yeah. And I was able to get sober for that pregnancy. That was like the only time I could get sober is while I was pregnant. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? Because obviously it was not just my life on the line.
Yeah.
You know? I was 17 when I had my daughter, and God love her. You know, God love her. She had lots of love. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
Like, you know, she was loved by every person, but she didn't have the mother that she deserved by any means at all. You know?
I totally get that.
Yeah.
I had my first son when I was 19.
Yeah.
And I was still so bad off in my addiction.
Yeah.
My addiction hadn't even reached its pinnacle yet.
Yeah.
When I had my first
Oh,
son.
same.
I hadn't reached my pinnacle of my addiction.
Yeah.
Luckily, it didn't go on for that much longer. But
Yeah.
yeah, having a kiddo that young, it's hard.
It's a
for
hard
them.
question. It's Day Wednesday.
Today's
I was like,
Wednesday.
we might as well just go all in on deep talks midweek.
We're filming Wednesday, but they're going
Yeah.
to see this on a Monday.
Oh yeah, Monday then. We're telling it's Monday. This is kind of a question for both of you, since you both shared having children early in the midst of all the drug and alcohol problems you were having.
Mhm.
How much of recovery has had to be related to shame about those experiences of young parenthood, and even like the admission that, like, hey, I wasn't the parent that child deserved? Like, has there been additional shame that you've had to work through
My
in
God,
recovery with
yes.
that?
So like that's what kept me in addiction for so long.
Mm,
You know what I mean? It was like just the shame of that. You know, I had messed up so royally that, I mean, there was nothing I could do to like right those wrongs. You know, and just being away from your children and knowing that it's your fault, and just like the constant repeating of scenarios over and over in your head, it's like you just want to push that back. You just got to let that go
Yeah.
somewhere else. You know, I mean, it just was too much, you know, especially like my daughter. Like, I always loved my daughter, and there would be like long periods of time where I'd be away from her, and I would write letters, and it was just such an emotional thing. But
Mhm.
for whatever reasons, I couldn't get it. I just could not get it, you know?
Yeah.
Like in my early 20s, I went off on this. I was going to find my biological father. Like, I had finally met him like in my younger teenage years, but whatever happened and we were out of contact, and I went to find my dad, you know, and I thought that was going to be the answer to all my problems, which it wasn't. He rejected me, and it just
made things worse.
made things worse. And
Yeah.
instead of like coming home and being a good mom, I just was like trying to escape me, you know,
Yeah.
and just kept digging the hole deeper and deeper, you know, and it was sad because it was like history repeating itself. Like, I didn't know my dad, and now I have this young daughter. who
Yeah,
doesn't-
becoming the thing that you were hurt
Yeah.
by. Yeah.
And that's like just, it's heartbreaking.
You're building on this idea that I often see in the recovery community be misconstrued by somebody that's looking in at addiction versus the one that's struggling with addiction looking out.
Yeah.
Is we as people who have struggled with addiction,
Mhm.
we can see that our actions are affecting other people,
Yeah.
and it affects us.
Yeah.
It really does
Yes,
affect
yes,
us.
Yes.
And oftentimes what I tell the people that I'm working with is like, yeah, you know, I've just got to get sober, and all these problems will be solved. I just got to get sober.
Mm-hmm.
And my response to that is usually, unfortunately, you don't realize how much stronger addiction is than your wants and your needs.
Yeah.
It's so much stronger
Yeah.
than your wants and your
Absolutely.
needs. And unfortunately, somebody looking in on addiction is going to say, well, they're just so selfish that they can't see that
Yeah.
they're affecting everybody else around.
Yeah.
And you know, at times I'd be willing to agree that there were periods of my in my addiction where I was so selfish that I could not see how my behavior was affecting others. But
Yeah.
every once in a while, I look up and go, "Oh wow, this sucks
Yeah.
for everybody that's involved."
Yeah. Like, that was like definitely when I first started using drugs, like it was selfishness. Like I was so selfish. Once you bring children into the picture, I mean, obviously selfishness is still there, but it's like, it's the guilt and the shame, and you see
Yeah.
how it affects them. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
and it still isn't enough.
Hmm.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That's
It
a
is.
hard pill to
What was
swallow.
it for you that finally like tipped the scale and got you like into long-term recovery and sobriety?
So, I mean, I'd had the desire, and that's what I always tell people coming in. Like, you have the desire. You know, that's a huge percentage of it. Is that you have to have the
Yeah.
desire. But for me, I had burned all the bridges. You know, I had cut myself off from everyone who loved me, and I was going to prison. I mean, that's what the outcome was. And like, I had wanted, like, somehow in my addiction, I stumbled upon God, my Father. Like, he came to me, and like I realized like I was so loved, and like, you know, even though I didn't love myself, that God loved me, and like that just gave me like this hope. Like, okay, like I can find a purpose in this. There is a purpose because God created me on purpose. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it was like I was going to prison in my mind. It really was set, but COVID changed the course of my life forever. I'm so grateful.
Thanks, COVID.
Yeah, thank you, COVID. That's right.
Pandemic wasn't all bad.
No, I'm
Kept
grateful
people out
for
of
it.
prison.
That's right. But you know what? It was like
Was this a mental prison or was this actual physical prison?
physical prison.
Physical.
Yeah, I was going for 10 years. Violent time. You know what I mean?
What?
Yeah. And there was like this long period of time building up to that. So I'm going through all these mental and emotional like acceptance and all these things, trying to get ready for this long prison sentence, you know. But so I'd found God, and like I just kept in communion with him, and I was like, God, you know what? Please just be a part of this. Like, just give purpose to this experience, you know, please. I was just so desperate for love, you know, even though I knew I
Were
had
you
family.
content? It sounds like that you were content with that outcome.
I
Like-
actually had found peace in it. Yes.
Yeah.
So by the grace of God, I had, because I knew that God works through all things. You know, that's something that I had learned, that God is going to work through this experience. And even though it's not what I want, it's obviously what I need. And if it's not what I need, it's what God needs to work, you know,
Yeah.
for his glory, you know. And like with that, I did find peace. It's with knowing God and knowing that his plans are perfect and that he works through all things. I've been able to find peace with almost every like tragic situation. Without God, I would not have peace at all.
Yeah.
You know, in my life, I wouldn't be sober today. I would have never made it into AA. You know.
It's a big part of my healing journey. It
Yeah.
has been, is
Yeah.
recognizing that.
Yeah.
And recognizing that that it's, and I think what it did it for me was my relationship with God was non-existent for a long time, to a degree where I would consider myself an atheist, where I just had nothing. I knew nothing was there.
Mm-hmm.
Well, God has a funny way of approaching us. It sounds like I don't know what kind of like moment that you had, but it sounds like it was a quick, sudden moment.
It was like in an
yeah.
instance.
So
Yeah.
mine grew over time.
Mm-hmm.
It took time for it to grow. And one of the examples that I fell back on one day, I just really drilled it home, was the worst thing that I've ever gone through in my life, addiction,
Mm-hmm.
is now one of the most useful things that I have in my life today.
Mm-hmm.
And I get to reach people that I would not have ever been able to reach. I get to do things that I would not have ever been able to do
Mm-hmm.
if it had not been for that tragic time. And so now I know, looking back on these moments in my life that I considered at the time horrible,
Yeah.
and they were bad. It was not, really hard to go through. But now, look, you know, I get to say like, this was all for. This is why I went through that.
Yeah.
I can see that now,
Yeah.
hindsight. But that really helped me develop a relationship with God of my understanding. You know?
Like for me, like I am really grateful for my addiction, because I got the beautiful gift of desperation. You know what I mean? It broke me down so hard that I had to learn to rely on God, to call on God, to trust on him, to allow him to come and sort out my problems, because I always had these grand ideas like, oh, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this, and like, you know, I'm going to get there.
Yeah.
Never happened. You know what I mean? And it wasn't until I was so broken and so desperate, going to prison, not going to see my children, you know what I mean? After all, not seeing them for all this time anyway, you know, like, that I was able to really just give it all to God, surrender. That's what we talk about, surrender, you know, and like, what a beautiful gift, you know? And now I can practice it. You know, I heard all my life, give it to God. You got to give it to God. Well, how the heck do you do that? You know what I mean? Like, I could not figure that out. Like, I could not wrap my head around it.
What's the answer to that question?
Like, oh, you got
You asked it. Not
Okay,
me.
so
You
this
asked
is
it.
the thing. Like, that's hard to be able to tell somebody how to do it.
Yeah.
Like, when my daughter was, you know, asking me, how do I have a relationship with God? I you know what, I just told her, like, you include him in everything. You know what I mean? Like, you just stay, when I say, don't cease praying, like, all day long, like, I'm in conversation with God. You know what I mean? And like, to give it to him, I don't know how I did it, but now that I've done it, I can do it in every situation. Like, I'm a little bit of a control freak, so, you know, I might be trying to micromanage things, but I can usually finally, you know, see that and then step back and say, okay, God, like, you know, I know what I'm doing. Please take over again.
Yeah.
And I mean, he won't let you down. He's never failed me. You know what I mean? Even the loss of my daughter, like, that was painful and that hurt, and I couldn't believe it because I truly thought we had the rest of our lives. I mean, that's one thing. Like, I was like, I'm gonna get sober and we're gonna have a relationship forever, you know, because she was finally 18, custody stuff, all these things that, you know, put distance between us. But you know, we were finally at that point, you know, and I was sober for 1 year and she died, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And dang, I lost my train of thought again. I'm sorry.
Was that a hard place to stay sober in?
Like, so surprisingly, no.
Okay. Yeah.
You know, okay.
Because it could have gone either way.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And like, that's what a lot of people say. Like, I would have never stayed sober through that. But you know what? I never thought about using, you know, I swear it's like in that moment of surrender, when I really truly gave my life to God, like, I didn't get like sober immediately, you know, that wasn't like that. But I did eventually, because I was allowing him to show up in my life, and I wanted that relationship with him so badly. And once I was able to get sober, even in that situation, like, nothing could deter me from wanting that closeness to God, wanting to be the person that I knew he had intended me to be, you know? And that was such a gift. I mean, I don't know how I stayed sober through that. I mean, most people wouldn't have, you know, but I did. And it's just because I knew that he was working through that situation, and I wouldn't allow myself to think any other way, you know, like, I just know God is here. He is present and he's working through this, and everything is going to be okay, you know?
It's interesting to me that you guys have some similar parts of your story, but then parts of your story that happen really different. And I think it's important for people to realize that, like, everybody's story can be different, and that that's okay. But particularly, it sounds like you found faith and a relationship with God or a higher power prior to sobriety.
Yes.
And it sounds like you found it after sobriety. And I think that that's really interesting. And because, I mean, the program talks a lot about spiritual experience and spiritual awakening and all of these things. And sometimes I feel like clients get pigeonholed into thinking that the spiritual experience or spiritual awakening is this way, and that there's not multiple different ways that happens and kind of comes alive for people.
Right.
And to hear two people who have both had that, but in very different ways and on a different timeline, I think is really refreshing for some people.
Yeah, I agree.
April, if you don't mind me digging into a little bit more about your daughter, for all of our listeners, I know a lot of the details about it just from our conversations. But what happened? I know that your daughter's struggle with addiction was short. It wasn't that long, and that you guys had tried to get her into treatment, and that wasn't successful. My
daughter, I mean, from what I know, because she was also a very good manipulator as well.
Just like you.
She was so much like me in all the great ways, and unfortunately in those ways, you know. But she'd only really been experimenting, with drugs for like a year, you know, maybe a little marijuana in high school type thing, but nothing beyond that, you know. I think also for her, like relationships was kind of her downfall. You know what I mean? Like being with someone who is doing, you know, these drugs, it kind of led to her doing them as well.
Particular relationships with men, is that what you mean?
Romantic relationships.
Okay,
Yeah.
gotcha.
Yeah. But like I could tell something was amiss, you know what I mean? Like I was sitting in county jail and like I would be having these conversations with her because I was going to prison, you know what I mean? So,
Yeah.
and I could tell, like I would get these letters that were like seemed super manic, you know what I mean? But I knew what that was.
Yeah.
I knew what it was, you know, and I would tell her like, and she would kind of deny it, or then sometimes she'd admit it. But it was just, I was like, okay, she's just experimenting. Like we're gonna get through this. You know what I mean? Like she's not gonna pull one over on me. That's for
Yeah.
sure. You know. But then,
Like I'm streetwise.
yeah. But after I was finally back in, you know, society, and I was sober, working my program or whatever.
How long had you been sober at this point?
A year.
A year. Okay.
About a year. Yeah. Excuse me. She had come to me and she was like, look, things are out of control. You know what I'm saying? Like she was in tears, and like she had like lost a job, like working on this other job, but it just wasn't working out for her, and she wanted help. You know what I mean? And I was like, okay, we're going to get you help. You know, instantly that day got her into a treatment. You know, in Houston is where she ended up going. She was doing really good there. You know. She did have some mental health issues, you know, like in the past, rightfully so. And like she had been like kind of in a mental institution before, but this was different. This was like, you know, getting to like some core things, not just balancing out your med type thing, you know. And she was doing really good. I got to go down there. Actually was in Texas for whatever reasons, and got to see her on Christmas Day, and she was about to be getting out. And she agreed that she would go to sober living, got her in sober living. She was there for 8 days. Just took one pill. She split one pill with two other people. They had been using, I think, off and on a little bit, you know, because they were also in sober living.
Yeah.
But that one pill took her life. You know what I mean? So it was her first.
Fentanyl, I'm assuming.
Fentanyl, yeah. She thought it was a Percocet.
Yeah.
But it was fentanyl, and so, you know, that's why I always tell people, like, your next time, it most likely will be your last time. If you're doing fentanyl, please, you know, your next time will probably be your last time.
Yeah.
And it's just like heartbreaking because she was so young and so beautiful. And
how old is she?
I buried her on her 21st birthday, so she was 20 years old. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, that's tough. When she was going through that addiction, were there any times where, were there any times where you know, I lost the question I was going to ask. It's gone. Were there any times where you were able to set like some goals and some boundaries for yourself to keep kind of like yourself from getting too involved in her addiction?
Ooh, that's kind of hard. Like, so for me, I mean, she wouldn't really allow me to like get really involved. Like she would deny. But like I knew it was just one of those things. Like I just put all my trust into God and God's plans for her. You know what I mean? Like, I was just super available for her, you know, but I knew from my own experience of isolation and denial, like I didn't want her to isolate, you know, and she would, you know, there would be like times I wouldn't talk to her, or like, you know, she'd just tell me whatever she thought I wanted to hear for the phone conversation. But just trusting God and not try to take control of the situation, not force it onto her, you know, just know that, hey, I'm here for you whenever you need me, and just stand by that. You know what I mean? Yeah.
After she passed away, when did the healing process start? From what you've been, you know, like how you've been describing your story up to this point, it really sounds almost like the healing process started when you really began to develop the relationship with God. Like the healing process really began before, but
So
Just to
like
hear.
my healing process, like aside just like from life, from like addiction, like it started that day when God spoke to me. Like that day instantly I knew that I was loved. Even though I like I said, I know that my family loved me, but I didn't feel worthy. Okay, that was my main issue in life, was I did not feel worthy of like their love. I did not feel worthy of God's love. And like he just spoke to me like so clearly, you know. It was like it's just this undeniable knowing that like I was loved by my creator, this creator of all things. And instantly my healing started, because I was in a really dark place in that moment. Was broken down. My biological father had rejected me yet again, and I was like 33 years old at this point. Like I said, I didn't get sober instantly, okay?
Yeah.
But the
yeah.
healing of like just that rejection that I felt for whatever reason, self-inflicted, really, you know, I instantly started to heal. And I was full of joy, like in that moment, and
Yeah.
like nothing was going to take it. You know what I mean? It took me, like, I was so deeply wrapped up in drugs and that whole process that it did take me time to get sober, to figure out how to get out of this. 4 years,
Yeah.
you know what I mean? In fact, I couldn't figure it out. That's why I ended up in jail, going to prison, you know.
Yeah.
But through that surrender, God just gave purpose to my time, you know, and I meant it wholeheartedly. He rerouted my whole life, you know, and
Yeah.
here I am. I'm not in prison. I'd barely be halfway through with my prison sentence, you know, and instead I'm here getting to help other people, you know, find
Yeah.
their way. And it's like such a gift. Like, as far as healing from the loss of my daughter, so I did have peace. Like, there was other people in my family that are still struggling to find the peace from her loss. You know what I mean? And I just, like, for me, I eliminate an option for anything else. I just won't allow to like believe, to allow myself to get caught up in thinking about how, because it's painful. There's no way around that. Like there's
Yeah.
like there's no way around that. And maybe sometimes like I avoid like the emotion, and I try to convince myself that like, oh, I'm okay. But at the end of the day, whatever I'm telling myself is the truth. It's my truth. God is going to work through this. You know, these are God's perfect plans, and like it carries me through. I'm not going to say that I don't have days that like I get overwhelmed. Sometimes like the emotion, it hits me like a brick wall and I can't shut it off, you know. And thank God I work with wonderful people who are really understanding and, you know, that will allow me the space that I need to like get through that moment, you know. But I'm just not going to give up on knowing that God's smarter than me. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And he knows better than me.
That's
But a lot of people also think too that we're locked in to like only experiencing one thing emotionally with the same event. Like
Right.
we're locked in, and maybe that's, I don't know, I've never met your family or talked to them, but I can
Yeah.
imagine that like that's the place where they're stuck.
Mhm.
Is they're like, I feel grief and I feel loss and I feel pain,
Mhm.
and they've convinced themselves, therefore I can't feel
Joy.
peace or
Peace,
joy
yeah.
or gratitude.
Yeah.
And I think one thing that we have to reteach people, hey, it's okay to feel sad and grateful at the exact same
Yeah.
moment in
Yeah.
the exact same circumstances, that we're not locked in.
That's good.
Yeah.
Like emotions aren't, I almost said something that maybe could have got me in trouble. Emotions are not a binary experience,
Right.
right? Like we can have lots of them at the same
Yeah.
time that even feel conflicting.
Yeah.
And that's okay.
Yeah. Well, like so like when my daughter passed too, like I was actually just kind of coming alive. Like I had been living this life of death for so long, you know, and even though like I had finally had this relationship with God, like I still was isolating, I was still going in and out of jails, all these things, and like my life was like I was finally alive, you know, and like living for a purpose, and like, you know, it was like, I don't know. God's timing is just so it's a beautiful thing. Even though like I thought we had forever together, for whatever reason that's the time that God chose, and I was able to just keep going on. Like if it wasn't for AA and like my AA family, that's where I went instantly. Like the day that I found, you know, got that news, I went to them, and they just like embraced me and loved me. Like even though they didn't know what I was going through, maybe they did. It didn't matter. Like it was just like this love and support that I knew was there, and and I had my family. I just had all these things I hadn't had, in so long. And I was just surrounded by love. And God is very present, But my life was just starting at 38. I was 38 at this point, I don't know.
So you had a fellowship.
I had
You
a
had a
fellowship.
fellowship around you.
Yeah.
That's huge.
Yeah, it was huge.
There's really nothing that I go through in my day-to-day life. The big things, the good things, the bad things, the hard things. There's nothing that I don't involve in it.
Right. Yeah.
And that's a really special thing.
Yeah.
Going through what you've been through alone would be, infinitely harder
Yeah.
than it would be if you hadn't have found that fellowship.
Yeah.
And that's something that our families that are listening, whether it be somebody that's struggling with addiction or has someone that's struggling with addiction, there's fellowships for all of us.
Yeah. That's right. That's right.
There's 12-step fellowship programs for all of us. There's faith-based fellowships for all of us.
Yeah.
And so it's like, addiction is one of those things that is much harder to go through if you're by yourself.
Yeah. Yeah.
On both sides of the spectrum.
Yes.
Like this is kind of, like for me, this is about getting sober. Like I had family that supported me. You know what I mean? And so many people, I see them that they are alone and they don't have that kind of support. And like, I don't know that I could have got sober. I mean, God can do all things, but if I would have been able to get sober as easily as I did when I did, if I wasn't surrounded by my family supporting me and taking me to the outpatient, to taking me to all the things that I had to do, to the meetings and whatnot, because I didn't have a license, I didn't have anything, I didn't have a home, I didn't have anything.
Yeah.
And they, for whatever reason, gave me that opportunity, and it was just amazing. Like I could not have done it without that support system. And so I don't know, it's hard when you see people who are all alone,
Yeah.
don't have that. It's like,
Yeah.
oh man, and so family is everything. Support system is everything. Fellowship is everything. Like if you don't have a family, get involved in 12-step. Like you're going to have the family that you need,
Yeah, that's a good point, because family always doesn't mean like biologically related group of
right
people.
That's
like,
right.
There's a lot of family
That's
that
right.
are like fictive kin. It's like, this is my family because I have never had one, and a lot of people find that in the fellowship of 12-step program.
Yeah.
Well,
Or in church or in
or in a faith community.
Yeah.
I have a family that I love very much, and we have great relationships. I just spent yesterday all day with my dad, and I swear him and I we can't stop talking to each other. Like we literally would just talk forever about all the things. And the same way with my mom. My mom's at home right now watching the baby, and so my family and the fellowship we have is so crucial in my life. But in addition to that, they don't necessarily know all the things that I've gone through.
Yeah, absolutely.
But my other family, my secondary family,
right?
That family is full of folks that have gone through exactly what I have.
Yeah.
We share a common experience in that way.
Yeah.
And oftentimes we often share a common solution to that, to our addiction and all that other stuff. And so that's another component to it that's so important is yes, that fellowship is there to support you in the hard times, the good, the bad, but they understand something about it. They understand you in a way that you don't even have to say. You don't even have to talk about it.
Right.
And they know deep down that their common problem is your common problem. Their common solution is also your common solution. And that just goes without being said.
Yeah.
And that level of connection is so important to heal. It's so important to grow.
Yeah.
I don't know where I'd be without it.
Yeah.
Truthfully.
That's like one of the things about getting to work in recovery is that we all have like thinking minds, you know what I mean? And we all have that same common solution. And so you're like surrounded by people on a daily basis that you can relate with, and that you have the same goal, stay sober for today. You know what I mean? And that's a really huge part of my recovery as well. I'm very blessed.
Yeah.
Very blessed.
You're the TA supervisor here at Country Road.
I am.
Yeah. Did you start as a tech?
I started as a tech, yeah.
Yeah. I also started as a tech here. Did you start as a tech?
I did not start as a tech here.
You
No.
started as a tech? No, you sure didn't. No, you sure didn't. Yeah, you get to like put use to your story every day.
Yeah.
And that's one of the beautiful things about like coming through the other side. And just like we were talking about common solutions and common problems, I think that my struggle with addiction and my family's struggle with watching me go through addiction is very similar.
Mhm.
We often struggle with a lot of the same big feelings, a lot of the same common problems.
Mhm.
I know Derek can probably speak a little bit more in depth about what just the common problems that we share. But when oh gosh, now I lost my train of thought.
That's okay.
I threw Derek.
You guys haven't had enough coffee, man.
I guess not.
I guess not.
Or too much. That could also be the issue here.
Can I just change the subject for just a
Yeah,
second?
jump in.
Okay, so getting to work here is like the greatest joy because like God answered my prayer, because not only did he give me a purpose for today, but he gave so much purpose to my past, because now I get to apply my past every single day to trying to help other people. And like that's just such an amazing gift to me, because there was so much of a past, because I was an addict for 20 plus years, and like there's so many things that I've gained from that experience that I get to use to help the next person. And it's like, it's such a gift, because there's so much life wasted. But now I get to see it, full circle and help somebody else. And it's just a joy. Just wanted to say that.
Yeah, and that, I mean, you gotta ask, was it really wasted?
Right. Yeah.
I don't know. God's
Yeah.
timing.
Yeah.
God's timing.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yep.
You guys are both looking at me like I'm supposed to say something else
I'm
profound.
hoping that you come out with something that is profound.
I don't know if I've got anything profound. I think it's really cool when people's stories come full circle, though.
Yeah.
For both you guys, to a place where, and I think that doesn't just happen with addicts and alcoholics. That happens with lots of people who have stories that are full of pain or suffering, or life's been a little bit of a roller coaster, or a really good novel or a really good movie. Like most people's stories have ups and downs and curves and everything else, and to see like resolution to the problematic parts of people's stories, and then to see them be able to use their stories to help shape other people's stories, I just think is really cool.
It's an unintended consequence of my addiction. That's what that was. It's an unintended consequence of my struggle.
Yeah.
For it to help somebody else, I
Yeah.
didn't see that coming.
Yeah.
That came out of nowhere for sure. It came out of nowhere. I kind of remember what I was saying before I lost my train of thought. Because in my addiction, I struggled with a lot of shame. I struggled with a lot of guilt. I struggled with a lot of, if I'd have only done this different. I struggled with a lot of fear of the future, fear of the unknown. I don't know what's going to happen next. Anger. Why? Why me? Why now? Why can't I change?
Mhm.
And if I were a betting man, which I'm no gambler,
Have no one to hold.
yeah, well, I'd be willing to bet you that my mom would say the same things.
Mm.
She'd say the same things.
Mm.
She struggled with the same kind of shame, the same kind of regret, the same kind of fear,
Mm.
anger,
Mm.
and everything that we've been talking about with our struggles with addiction. I know if you take out the word addiction and replace it with the name of a loved one,
Mhm.
it's the same story. It's typically the same story, and oftentimes the solution is a lot of the same thing.
Mhm.
It was, just because I got, if my problem was getting sober, then that problem was resolved as soon as I walked into a treatment center, or as soon as I put down the drugs and alcohol for more than, 24 hours. But unfortunately, that doesn't solve the problem.
Right.
And it's the same for our loved ones. Just because I got sober, that doesn't solve my mom's problem.
Right.
She's still going to struggle with a lot of the same feelings.
Mhm.
It's not going to go away. She's still going to struggle with the same worry. And I'm speaking for you, Mom. I hope you don't mind. her and I have had long, extensive conversations about this and what that's looked like for her in her life. And we know today that just because I got sober didn't solve her problem. You know, she
Right.
still struggled with a lot of
Yeah.
those things. It typically takes time. It takes connecting with a power that's greater than yourself, like a fellowship or a church organization, or whatever the case may be. I hear a lot of similarities as we're talking about this. Just in now that I'm a lot more clear headed and I have a little bit of time under my belt, I can see from a different point of angle than just my own selfish view
Yeah.
that how I affected my mom. But yeah, it's an interesting thought to think about.
Mm-hmm.
I concur.
Are you putting the clinical stamp of approval?
Well, I mean, I think what you said is true of everybody on the planet.
Mm-hmm.
I think there is something maybe particularly unique about people who have struggled with some sort of addiction or alcoholism because of the compulsiveness of the behavior. But I don't think there's anything unique about the emotional experience of addiction or alcoholism. I think that that's the same emotional experience that every unhealthy person on the planet has had,
Yeah.
because it's full of shame and it's full of isolation and everything else, which is why for somebody that's like doesn't have a background of being addicted to anything, to be so embedded in recovery work for so many years and to see how much useful principles and beneficial things there are that happen in the recovery community, that I'm like, man, if everybody on the planet did this stuff, the world would be a better place. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's because good recovery work and good 12-step work is digging underneath the alcohol or the drug to resolve core issues of
Right.
shame and these other things.
Yes.
And that's stuff that everybody deals with.
Yeah.
Right? Like, everybody has a common experience of feeling ashamed about something they've done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's why we're kind of lucky, because we've got to a point where we got the help, because life is still hard. Life is still happening. Everybody has issues. Nobody just has like this perfect life. You know what I mean? Oh, Derek's life seems pretty perfect, but
Derek's just perfect.
yeah. But like, we have learned coping mechanisms. We have worked the 12 steps. We've done these things. We've gotten to grow and realize that, like, work on those core issues, like you said, where there's people struggling with all sorts of things and don't know where to begin, even, are so overwhelmed by it that they just don't know where to start,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
It's good stuff. I want to special shout out for you. Thank you for coming on to this podcast.
Thank
today.
you for making it so comfortable, because I was really nervous.
I was nervous too. I'm nervous every time I do anything for a public audience.
Right.
But you just get in there and you do it. And hopefully somebody gets something out of it, right?
Yeah.
That's the goal. Is hopefully there's this podcast, you sharing your story, or sharing our stories, it reaches somebody in a special way that they wouldn't have been able to otherwise hear it.
Yeah.
Because it's coming from somebody that has experienced it, and that's all we can hope for, right?
Yeah.
Using our
right.
experience to help other people.
That's right.
If you guys have any questions, comments, concerns for April, whatever, share it in our comment section, and we'll get back to you with a question or another comment, or maybe a concern that we have for you. I don't know. Now I'm just making stuff up. Thanks for joining in on Addiction Truth this month, and we look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.